Nothing I am going to say is meant to in any way discount the incredible achievements many of you, if not all of you, have contributed to. We've circled the globe with our movement to end partner abuse. Last year, we probably served close to 1 billion women and children worldwide. We've saved countless lives, and we've certainly improved and ameliorated the suffering of countless thousands of women. So we'll talk about the dynamics of coercive control, what it means to identify coercive control not as a crime of assault, not as a crime against women's bodies, but as a crime against women's liberties and rights. Each of us meets someone in this business that stays with us and becomes for us who everyone else is. And once we get that lesson, we can't unlearn it. When the first woman and her 9-year-old daughter hid in our house before we had shelters of refugees, and all I understood was, because of the physical injuries that she presented when she came to us, was to ask her about the violence. And I had been working with survivors of rape, and so when she said violence wasn't the worst part, and it would be another 20 years before I really began to understand what that woman had meant when she told me violence wasn't the worst part. And Deela shoots her husband 4 times, point-blank range. She takes the gun that he's had under the pillow, shoots him 4 times at point-blank range in the head, then goes downstairs, calls the police, and comes back upstairs to get the gun. And this is what the police officer wrote about Deela when she got to the station. Mrs. Bayless described her husband as a very complex person. She stated that he had always demanded from her an exact outline of how she spent her day. She said she would have to prepare a summary of meals planned for the month for his approval. She said, quote, "He was never happy with macaroni or steak or potatoes, but instead demanded meals such as veal marsala. Nothing she did would ever please him," she said. "Nothing was ever good enough to meet his demands." She relayed one incident which prompted a beating, explaining that they had bought their house about 1 year ago. He once asked her to tell him what they needed for the house. She said she began to name some things, nothing specific named. And he asked her if she thought shades were important. She replied, yes, they were important too. He then demanded to know why she hadn't thought of them herself, why she wasn't caring enough. And then he began to beat her. So, I mean, while the beating is there were no police reports of prior incidents. All I had in that case was one medical visit for a broken thumb, which her husband had broken by slamming the car door on it, but there was no evidence of this in the medical record. I was able to document numerous minor assaults, non-injurious assaults, just from the interview and some contemporary records she came. But this puzzled the officer. Why would somebody who killed her husband talk about veal marsala and menus on the way down to the station? What was going on here? And the prosecutor, after interviewing Deela, heard her she told the prosecutor, look, you know, every night he would have his way with me. We would have sex every night. But that night that she killed him, she told the prosecutor, we went to bed without sex. And so the prosecutor's theory in that case was that this was a woman spawned. In other words, she killed him because there was no sex, she wanted sex, and that was it. She described how one day her boyfriend, Nick, locked himself in the closet, and then after a little while came out with, in those days, these long perforated sheets of computer paper with what he called the lists. Vacuum daily so you can see the lines. Remove cocky picture of naked lady. Potpourri with flower scent. You have to actually see this. And I've gotten about half a dozen of these from police officers who've taken them after an investigation at the scene. No Bosworth, that was her dog, on the couch, and that's capitalized. CDs and cassettes in alphabetical order. And then it goes room to room until the last paragraph, which are called house rules, and these are all capitalized. No men in the house, no men on the telephone, no pictures of men except Nick himself, obviously, God, or Poppy. Poppy was her father. She was allowed to have pictures of her father. And be a good girl at all times. We call that in my business the covering law rule. Like, don't make me jealous. The covering law rule is really the rule that he can appeal to when all the other rules are obeyed or followed. So isolated was the woman who was subjected to those rules, Laura. So isolated was she that she had developed a Stockholm syndrome, which meant that she defined his rules, the rules that he enforced through rape and physical abuse. She defined achieving and following those rules as the only source of her identity. She came to believe that the very man who was hurting and controlling her was the only one who could protect her. And I want to tell you that a year and a half after he was killed in a motorcycle accident, she continued to clean till you could see the lines. She continued to alphabetize the CDs and color code her clothes and do all of the other things because she had yet to recover a sense of self that was rooted in any other reality. Actually, the women we work with lead many lives, the lives that they were, the life that they're living under coercive control, and the most important life of all, the life that has been suppressed, but that is underneath the surface, and when freed is able to emerge and allowing her to play her part in the world. Every woman I have ever worked with has a safety zone, an area in their life. It could be a supplemental relationship, it could be an object, it could be almost anything, a place in their life that they can go to feel free and breathe the air of a free person. And these guys go on search and destroy missions. They listen to the phone messages. They go through the computer. They go through the drawers. They go through the pocketbooks. Every place that you might breathe the air of a free person, they are trying to be there and choke you off. Learning that violence is not always visible and that it takes the form of coercive control is a very important issue. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about why the violence model doesn't work, why we've found it inadequate, and why anyone now who works in the field has to look beyond violence. Certainly fewer than 5% of all domestic violence assaults involve injury, and only about 1 or 2% involve serious injury, and only a tiny, tiny, tiny proportion lead to homicide. So if you wait for homicide or serious injury, or even injury, before we intervene, you miss 95 to 99% of domestic violence. So we have good news. Our arrest rates are way up, our prosecution rates are way up, our convictions in terms of who's being charged are up. There are, in some areas, 80% now of people who are being charged are being convicted. And as you know from the HMIC report, in the last 3 years, reporting of abuse to police has gone up 31%. Now the bad news is because of the high reporting, police are overwhelmed. Not surprisingly, there have been enormous cuts in the police. The main reason why police are overwhelmed is that the numbers of women who are experiencing multiple assaults and making multiple reports to the police for help has increased dramatically. In other words, the number of victims hasn't increased. But what has increased is the number of reports to the police and the number of reports to police per victim. And again, if you're jumping ahead with me and you recognize that one of the elements of the new offense is that it allows us, for the first time, gives police the tools, for the first time really, to charge all of the offenses that someone has committed as a continuous course of conduct, conduct a serious crime investigation, and to put the offender away for a maximum period of 5 years. That's incredible. But the reality is that even when men are being convicted, and that's in a tiny proportion of cases, virtually no one is being removed from the street. They are, in fact, being fined or getting some other interdiction that doesn't protect the women involved. what was happening was that the police services had fairly low morale when it came to just domestics, even though there were specialized services springing up. The reality was that your frontline officers seemed to have very low morale. And why was there low morale? Again, because they were going to the same house again and again and again and again and again, seeing the same offenders repeatedly, the same victims repeatedly, without the tools to produce the justice outcomes that we would expect and hope they would do, and most importantly, without really providing the kind of long-term effective protection that the women who were calling those police hoped for and deserved. Throughout the world, women were reporting that they considered all of these elements of coercion and control parts of abuse, but none of the laws were reflecting that because they were defining it only as violent incidents. Because in order to commit domestic violence, you have to have proximity to a victim. In order to commit coercive control, you do not. Coercive control is an amazing form of oppression because it crosses social space. And in order to investigate and interdict coercive control, you have to follow coercive control through social space. You've got to follow the surveillance. You've got to follow the stalking. You've got to follow all of the elements that allow the perpetrator to continue to be in control when she's at work, when she's shopping, when she's at her mother's house, when she's at the hairdresser's. All of those are sites throughout the entire community. Much more effective in that sense than physical violence. So bottom line is that the violence model that we were using, where we equated domestic violence with individual discrete assaults, was having the effect of trivializing what women were experiencing, which were multiple assaults, and I'll show you some more data on that in a second, rapes and other kinds of problems, and normalizing it. Because what was happening, and this is no reflection on police or on other case workers, refuge workers, or any others, what was happening was that police who are returning again and again to the same house, or the same women were coming repeatedly to refuge, or the same women were showing up on the rolls of Marek or social work or any of the other sites at which women appear. After they showed up multiple times and nothing effectively changed in the family, services would begin to withdraw. The police response, even if they showed up at a call, became more and more perfunctory. The social work response, even if they were sympathetic with these families, began to think, well, this is the kind of family where this happens. It's tragic, but there's nothing we can do. In other words, just as the abuse was escalating, the entrapment, we were withdrawing our services because, don't you know, our interventions might even become part of the problem. And the sad thing about what we were doing is that, and this is really important for you to get, abuse can be prevented. It's one of the only crimes that we know that can actually be prevented. And the reason we know this is because the number of cases that are new cases in our community is very, very small. So what does this tell you? It tells you if we had effective early intervention, we could reduce the incidence of partner abuse by 86%. And now if I tell you it's one of the leading causes of female alcoholism, leading cause of female depression, leading cause of drug abuse, leading cause of female suicidality, leading cause of homelessness, leading cause of HIV, reducing the incident 84% would have an amazing effect on women's health. You're going to see that the focus of regulation in coercive control, the major focus of regulation in coercive control, is on those roles that women enact simply because they're women by default. How they clean, how they cook, how they care for their children, how they make love. All of the things we associate with women's gender roles are the specific focus of regulation in these families, so that he imposes on her the very gender stereotypes that we have spent 50 years, not only in the women's movement, but in society as a whole, emancipating women from. The great limit of our current offense, the new offense, and something we will have to remedy, but something you will have to work yourself around because it's critical, is the fact that so much abuse takes place after women separate. And because separation is not a single act, as sometimes judges think who issue stay-away orders. It's not a single act, as sometimes police think who file a 28-day protection order. It's a process of extrication. Women leave an average of 3, 5, 7 times, depending on the area. And if we don't document who has control of the credit cards, Who has the money? Who's monitoring all of her expenses and making her return things when he doesn't like what she's getting? Then we haven't begun to conduct a serious crime investigation or really get the story we need. Once we redefine and understand that it's the suppression of freedom that we're talking about, freedoms that are so basic that their absence doesn't even get noticed by most of us. Remember, partner abuse is not primarily about what men do to women. It's primarily about what men keep women from doing to themselves.